Hello, everyone, and welcome to the October edition of Techspert Talks. I'm Troy Rainey, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today is Visualization Day, and we have multiple Qlik experts ready to share with us. Patrick, why don't we start with you? Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. It's great to be here again. So my name is Patrick Nordström. I'm a product manager at Qlik. I oversee the visualizations and the analytics. So I also tend to keep track of other things inside of the client, but mostly the visualizations.
Great, thanks. And Bruno?
Yeah, hi, Troy. My name is Bruno Calvo. I work in the UK pre-sales team. The thing that I really focus on is where our technology meets the end user. So really, I love turning what are otherwise boring and mundane data sets into visualizations that tell stories, provide insights, and inspire new ways of thinking.
And Patrick, could you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. My name is Patrick Lundblad, not the other Patrick. I'm a lead product designer here at Qlik. So I work in R&D with the dev teams. I work with the architects, with the UX designers and other people, mainly representing the users and talking and showing how you users out there use our product and how we can make a better experience for you.
Fantastic. Well, today we're going to take a look at a lot of different things. We're going to start off with the product roadmap, take a look at features that have been released and what might be coming around the corner. We're going to take a look at a really cool new feature, the layout container, and see how that works. And we're going to take a look at some cool things that you can do with bookmarks, some old and some new, and what's possible there. Now, Patrick Nordström, let's start with you. Could you highlight for us some of the updates and features that have been released with Qlik Cloud recently?
Sure. All of this is part of a larger undertaking, trying to improve on the look and feel. Currently working on new improved tables. You might have already seen the new straight table. Maybe the biggest change is the ability to pick and choose without going into edit mode which dimensions and measures I want to look at. So it's a bit of a catch-all to serve a variety of different users. The next major update to the table will be a multi-page PDF export. For all the other charts and the prior tables, we only can export the current view. But with the new table, we will be able to create multiple pages of PDFs.
Wow, that's really cool. Would you quickly highlight some of the other recent improvements?
You might have seen we added settings for the sheet background, settings to make the grid more fine granular so you can move things around more precise. We added images and colors to the chart backgrounds. We also improved on the axis font styling. Lots of people have been asking for the ability to change the font besides using a custom theme.
So does that allow you to set a different font on the axis label of a chart versus the title?
Yes. If you go into a chart, on the presentation, under styling, for each, there's a general section that applies to basically all charts, like the title, subtitle, and footnote. And then you have additional styling specific to that type of chart. So you will be able to set the axis title, axis label, in this case for the bar chart, value labels, legend title, and legend labels, also to set the color and the size and the font family.
That's really granular. That's great.
This has been possible to do with a custom theme. We now provide both options. We can now switch off the sheet title and the toolbar. There's this one called Show Toolbar, and the other one is Show Sheet Header. But we will also be able to change more of the look and feel of the standard top bar that you can see. It gives you more screen estate to do whatever you want. In this case, I'm having this app that should work in both Swedish and English. So in order to change the names of things, I'm using the expression-based labels, but I don't have that type of control over the common selection bar because it's a mirror of the data model. So if I now set it to English, I can control how this selection bar should work. I've replaced the selection bar with my own. If I make selections here, and then I have buttons to clear the selection or go back in the selection. I also have different buttons to move between the sheets.
That's great.
The filter panes have looked pretty much the same for many years, but now we have lots of more abilities to line them up in a grid mode. We have the histogram mode, we have the compact view mode. You can turn them into checkboxes or into radio buttons.
Very cool.
You might have noticed the line object that appeared not long ago. It's a way to style and add dividers and decorations to your dashboard.
Oh, that's great.
We added the font styling also to the KPI object, so that's also something new.
I love all of that, especially the filter pane and new styling options. Are there any upcoming improvements that you can tell us about?
For all of these visualizations improvements, they end up in the cloud first, and then we round up all these changes for the on-premise releases, which are 4 times a year. The next one, which I am really eager to push out, is the new text object. It's a rich text object replacing the text and image objects, and it's more like a rich text object that you can find in Confluence or Miro, where you can change the font family, size, and weight and color. You can change the paragraph control. You can also have ordered lists and bullet lists. You could create just for formatting purposes. You can add a table to your chart, and then you can decide how many rows and columns, whether you should have borders. It's not like a standard sense table where you make selections. It's more useful for doing formatting and perhaps creating this ad hoc metrics table.
Just sort of spacing things out into columns and rows.
Yeah, so the really big thing that will be coming this year, which is the layout container. The way it works is that you lay out objects. In this case, I have a grid. I can overlay the objects so they can be on top of each other, and I can decide the order, and I can use the new settings for background color, whether I want to have the same background or a transparent background. When I move things around, I get guidelines, and you can select multiple things at the same time. So it's a major big change. And of course, with great power comes great responsibility. You have a lot of options, but you also have possibilities of things going wrong.
Well, that's why it's great that we have Bruno here today to talk about some best practices for how to use this new layout container. Bruno, what do you have to share with us?
Good stuff. Thank you, Troy. As Patrick mentioned, with great power comes great responsibility. So let's have a look into the layout container and how we can really get the best out of this object. So I've just put together 5 tips to try and bear in mind. We use grids a lot to create symmetrical layouts, to create consistency in the user experience, and also to ensure that they're visually appealing. For example, BBC website, it's really important to stick to a consistent approach so that objects are laid out in a beautiful way that's easy to navigate. The next thing then is the best things are always odd. If you imagine that being arranged on a plate in a 2, it just wouldn't quite look right. And so we have to consider that in terms of how we're laying out objects. So I've just done a simple example here where I've just put 2 KPIs over a line chart. That looks okay. But actually 3 just somehow looks more complete. So here you can see this is a sales dashboard, courtesy of Denis Jaskowiak. He's a good example of both sticking to a grid as well as doing things in 3s. He's laid this out with 3 kind of specific containers, and then within each of those containers are a variety of objects and a sidebar as well. So I know that might look like 4, but actually that's a consistent navigation object that's been built on the side there. But this is just a simple example of how we've stuck to a grid and we've used an odd number of containers, and I think this is quite pleasing to the eye.
Is this one layout container behind that, or are we looking at 3 layout containers with objects inside them?
Yes, there's 4 layout containers there. We've got a layout container here that then contains a number of different objects. So this has got all the filters and so on. Then this is handled as a separate container. And again, you can see the different elements in here, a 3rd and a 4th container. And you can see within each of these containers, as I said, you've got all the different objects. We've also you've got a line object here, which is creating nice dividing lines as well between each of the different elements.
And that fine grid.
Yeah, you can have grid list design within the layout container as well. So the choice is yours in that regard.
Okay, well, that was a great design example of keeping things in odd numbers. What's next?
The next point then was around the use of images. You can see here we've used a background image. Alberto Vaghi here from the Italian pre-sales team. This design credit, Alberto. So the image here has been used to create kind of like a high contrast theme. Alberto is very clear to point out when you're using background images like this, you have to make sure that you're using images that are fairly solid in color. If you've got lighter objects in the background image, it will interfere with the legibility of the dashboard. Alberto uses these line objects to demarcate different sections. He's also done some fun stuff here. So you can layer objects on top of each other. Alberto's put in a view plants map. You can click on there, and that actually puts an overlay on there. Once you start building these custom navigations, he grayed out this button because it's now just a closed plants map. It's light there to highlight that it can be activated. And then he's always creating a route out. For example, here on this filter pane, if you click on the filter pane here, you've always got a way to uncheck it. When you're building these custom user experiences, you need to make sure that you've always got a way back to navigate and so on.
Is it possible to open up the edit on that and show us how it was configured?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it looks like he's hidden the header.
Yeah, he's hidden the header. You have to be mindful of that because that will hide this advanced options box, which is where you can edit some of this. And here's that button. So this is how he's basically set the icon in here. So if we go into the expression here, he's used a variable, yeah. And then according to the variable, then it's either going to show menu icon or the remove icon there.
Very cool. That whole layering objects on top of each other. I love that.
Yeah, this is what a lot of people used to do in Qlik View. You can just use a container object at the moment. And within the container, you can then have a conditional show and hide so that a different object will appear. But that's only on a single object basis. So you might want to layer more than one object on top of each other. Or as you can see in this example here, you're actually directly overlaying an object on an already existing object, kind of bringing it to the foreground. So the layout container really opens up these possibilities.
Okay.
So it's really important through the use of color, like in this example, where we've got a very dark background. And then just to delineate each of the objects, we've used slightly lighter shades of black to then demarcate each of the objects onto the background. So yeah, think carefully about how you use line objects, background images, and so on, and some of the icons, etc. And try to use common icons that people can easily work with, especially when, for example, building sidebar navigation, that type of thing.
Sure, you want it to be intuitive for users.
Exactly. Okay, number 4. So one of my favorite quotes from Bruce Lee: simplicity is the key to brilliance. Now you've got this ability to overlay objects. There's a real temptation to cram in lots and lots of KPIs and different charts and so on. And we need to really be focusing on the key business questions. Why are the users trying to log into that screen and not trying to do too many things in one place? What we'd really like to do is build a very nicely curated space that's been thoughtfully laid out and designed. And generally, I would say that 4 charts on a single screen, maybe 5, sticking to our odd number rule, but 4 or 5 charts is about the maximum we want to put on a screen.
Okay, that's a good rule of thumb.
Personal anecdote, but when I moved from working with Qlik View to Qlik Sense, I really loved the fact that I could very quickly just drag and drop objects onto the screen in Qlik Sense. I could just very quickly place objects on a screen, visualize them, and actually get some of the important data insights very quickly. For a lot of users, where you're just building dashboards for yourself or a very small audience, I probably wouldn't look to use this layout container because it's going to take up a lot of time. However, if you're building a central dashboard, then in that example, then it probably is worth investing the time using a layout container, coming up with some really kind of high impact bespoke designs and so on. Just because you now have the layout container doesn't mean you should always use it. Just keeping things simple and quick and easy also has its advantages. So I think it's really worth highlighting that as a final point.
Great. Tweaking cost time, definitely.
Tweaking cost time. Just to summarize those 5 key tips. Firstly, stick to your grid. When you're laying things out, then using odd numbers always presents better. Thirdly, image is everything. So really think carefully about your color palette, but also when you're using background images, make sure that those images aren't interfering with the reading of the dashboard. Simplicity is the key to brilliance, said the great Bruce Lee. And then the final point, now you've got this layout container, it doesn't mean you have to use it. Deploy it in the right circumstance that really kind of wow the users. And that is going to take you a lot of time. So invest that time carefully.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, Patrick. So from something totally new to something that's been around for a long time, one of my favorite features of Qlik Sense is bookmarks. Can you talk to us about what is possible with bookmarks?
Sure, Troy. I don't know about you. I normally use bookmarks a lot when I'm inside an app and I maybe want to come back later and show things to other people.
Definitely. So what are we looking at with this app here?
I have a cars data set. I have some cars from 1978 up to 1982.
Okay, so it's a small data set. Can you show us how to pre-apply a selection when users open the app?
Yeah. And I'm going to go and select 1982. I'm going to go into Bookmark. Let's create a new bookmark, latest year. And once it's saved, right-click here on it, set as default bookmark. That means that whenever another user comes into the app, once you've published it, the first time they open a session to the app, that is the bookmark that will be selected.
That's really cool. And that option to set bookmark as default, has that been around for a while?
I think it's been around for the latest 6 or 7 years or something like that.
That's amazing. I
Sometimes
love that. I've never seen it.
time goes on. There's a new year. Happy New Year, Troy. There's a new car. Maybe there's a Swedish IKEA car or something. I'm just going to do an inline load and add one more car. It's more of a prototype car, we could call it, because it has really bad stats.
Okay.
And if we clear the selection, sorted from top to bottom, we got this new car in here, no acceleration, no horsepower. User comes into the app, maybe the 2nd of January. Latest year is selected, and they're wondering why we're still in the past.
Okay.
You can actually click on the bookmark. You have the eye icon in here. If you expand it, you can see down here, what is the selection that's being made? It's a selection against 1982, actually not a selection against the latest year.
Okay, it shows you exactly what's being calculated there.
What's being calculated, what's being stored.
Okay, I like that.
In this case, I need to use a search expression to search for what is the latest value within my data set. I have a cheat sheet in the bottom left. I'm going to say equals year because that's the field I want to have. And I want to find what is the max year within here. Total looks through the data that is selected. Many people just click on 1983 and they click OK. Search expression needs to be executed by pressing enter or return. I go up here. I'm going to create a bookmark. I'm going to call it max year instead. So now if I create it, latest year has 1982 selected, while max year instead has the search expression in here. You can actually copy this if you remove the set expression around it.
Okay, and if you apply the max year bookmark now?
Max year is selected. I mean, it is a truly horrible car. Let's remove it. Go back in here, have the table, uncomment. And now, no selection applied, and I click max year. And 1982 is selected instead, because that is the max of the data.
That could be quite handy as a default bookmark, to have the max year as the default selection. Now,
there is some issues with this. Let's say, for example, that you as a user are in here, you're clicking around, you're selecting a couple of years. So now I got 1978 to 1979. I see there's a bookmark here to get the max year. 1982 is not selected because the search expression as it is right now, use the total modifier and look through everything that was within the selection.
Right.
So 1978, 1979, of course, 1979 is the max one. But maybe you want to have a bookmark that always selects the latest year, no matter what selection a user has done.
Right. So how do you do that?
In this case, use the second one down here. I'm going to use an only qualifier around it and bracket 1, ignore selections for year. That's because I just want to have 1 year selected. Equals, I'm going to do max again, the bracket 1. I think you can use type all instead also if you want. Total, year, press enter. In this case, I'm going to use a new feature that's available, which is replace bookmark. I'm going to use the update.
So you took the old max year bookmark and replaced the search expression with one that'll apply the actual max year, irrelevant of current selections.
Yeah, because you don't want to go in here and create a new bookmark. You want to use the same bookmark, but with a new expression in here. So quite handy to just be able to update the bookmark.
That's great.
What's the difference there in those options between the update and the edit icon?
So the update just updates the selection, while the edit one is if you, for example, want to rename it, if you want to change the description, or if you want to delete it. So now I have 1978, 1979 selected. I go to the bookmark. 1982 is selected, despite having selections within the field already for some other values. That's a great way of having that bookmark, making certain that it is always the latest year, not the maximum of what's in there.
That's great. So that's really demonstrating the difference between a static bookmark and a dynamic one.
Yep. Another thing you can do is to use the layout options within the bookmark as an app developer. So Patrick talked about this new table down here. I'm just going to go into edit mode and show you how it's set up. This is the new straight table, which has the columns that are available and visible to the user. It also has some alternative columns. I can go in here and I can add to this table and create the table that I want. This is called changing the layout. Whenever I go in here and I create a new bookmark, I have the option here of saving the layout, or for example, saving the variables as part of the bookmark. I can come in here at another time where I, for example, have a different table, and I can click on the bookmark. I can click my table exploration, and it will apply the selections I had. And it will also go to the sheet I was on, and it will make certain that the layout, the dimensions and measures that were within the chart are also selected so that I come back to exactly the same view and not just the same sheet and same selections.
Okay.
So I can, for example, use the button object here with two different bookmarks that I created with two different layouts. And I could say that this is one type of standard report, and this could be another type of standard report. I'm just using the bookmark here to be able to change the layout for the end user. It is the button object. It is just an apply bookmark, and the user can always go back into chart exploration and create their own report.
That's a really cool concept, to provide a couple of pre-built layout templates for the user, but still allow them to build their own layout after they've seen some options. How can users share their own bookmarks?
Yep. In this case, I've used the report and I've saved a couple of countries in here. And I can do my bookmark that I want to share, save the layout, which means that the link I send to you is actually going to be exactly the same. To be able to share a bookmark, I actually have to make it public first. You can see that it needs to be made public because you need to be able to have access to the bookmark. So I can copy this bookmark and send it to you. So that's one way, but then you are going to end up with a public bookmark. Another way to do is by just right-clicking the chart, clicking share, clicking copy link, and then you will get a link to that visualization with the selection state that was at that time.
Okay, so that's not actually a bookmark, but it's applying the selections that are current in the app at the time you copied it.
Because bookmark is a resource that can be either private or public, but this is using another service to store the ID of the app, ID of the sheet, ID of the visualization, and what has been done to the visualization. In this case, the selections.
Well, now it's time for Q&A. Please submit your questions to the Q&A panel on the left side of your ON24 console. All right, first question. Can you help me understand why, after applying a bookmark, that my selections disappear?
Sure, Troy. So this is something that quite often comes up as a bug to R&D. They get assigned to me and I look through it. And I often notice that, for example, they're using the wrong type of search expression.
Okay.
In this case, it might be that I'm using the year as a field, the max function, because I want to have the latest year. But I want to have the latest year among everything. So I use the bracket 1. Then I do total year. This is a possible search expression. It does evaluate 1982. I selection, save location. And as long as I don't have a value selected, this is going to execute and work fine. But the case can be that, for example, due to triggers, due to other things, you might have another year selected before already. And now if you go in here and you apply the my selection, that's when the selection bar disappears because the search expression evaluates to an empty state. There is no 1982 available within there. And that's why you need to use the only bracket 1 year before to say within the year field also make certain every selection is possible to do.
Yeah, I can totally see how that could be frustrating for customers, especially when we say, that's working as designed.
Yeah, especially once I go back in and click it again, I get customers complaining that I usually need to click on a button twice to get a bookmark to apply or a selection to apply. And that's because you already have a selection and we cannot overwrite that selection.
Well, I appreciate you clarifying that for people. All right, well, let's move on to the next question. How can we deal with multi-page straight and pivot table exports?
If you do a data export, you will get multiple pages. The Excel file, if you open up in Excel, it will have multiple pages. Perhaps the user is referring to the PDF export, which today is only printing the current view. One of the new features of the new straight table that is coming up this autumn is the ability to print all pages, up to 50 pages in the PDF export. So that is something coming in the new straight table.
Fantastic. That's nice to know. Great. Well, next question. Is it possible to put containers inside containers to get a bit of a tabular layout?
So in most cases, you can solve that without putting the container inside of the container. It's a bit like the movie Inception. After a while, it becomes really strange behavior. So first versions of the containers will not allow for putting containers in containers. I would like, though, to be able to put a layout container inside of a tab container, but we are rewriting the tab container to look more like the layout container. No containers in the containers in the first releases.
Okay, that sounds like a wise thing. It's a pretty big rabbit hole that could turn into. Great. Next question. How can we find out about new features that are added, and how often is Qlik Cloud updated?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is what we struggle with. We are very quick on delivering new things, but there's also the other part of telling people about it and also to get users to use the new features. We do have the product innovation blog. There are also the What's New reference documentation on helpqlik.com. And we do also have in-app announcements in the cloud platform. For the on-premise users, a month ahead of the release, there's a technical preview where you can download documentation. And I also publish an app that you can try out. And you can actually try out the full installation. If you don't have the strength to do that, you can at least download the PDF.
All right, great. We'll just move along to the next question. Is there a way to easily change the font in an entire app at once?
Yes, there is. You should set the font family setting in a custom theme. Then when you apply the custom theme, all the fonts are changed immediately. This is also a great question because we now have the ability to set the font in a custom theme and per chart. Perhaps we should also expose it in an app settings, but that will be later on.
Okay. And if in that situation, if you set the styling in the theme, it applies to everything, and then went in after that and changed it in individual charts, would that chart setting override the theme?
Yes, that's the beauty of the priority. So we have the theme settings, which could be overwritten by perhaps coming app settings, which could be overwritten by chart settings, which could be overwritten by measure settings. So this order of things. And I would like to keep that way. Otherwise, it gets really confusing.
Okay, next question. Could you show how to make a filter pane collapsible?
Currently, the filter pane collapses when there's not space enough for it to expand. And there's no space for the scroll bar. So it collapses down to a drop down instead. But actually, it's a really good question because this is one of the new styling options in the next set of features for the filter pane. That we will have a setting that you could decide whether the filter pane should always collapse, never collapse, or collapse by auto. Of course, if you make the window so small you can't see it, they will be moved into what we call the overflow section, where you have this expand button and you have the list of all fields.
It's nice to know what's coming. That sounds really exciting. Are there any style templates or demo apps available to review?
Yeah, there's a bunch of demo apps. You have the demos at Qlik.com. You have the visualization showcase app. You also have the What's New app, which is possible to download. And then you have 7 apps called Top 10 Tips apps for visualization development in Sense. Then we also have the visualization vocabulary app. And we also try to bundle an app with every new release. And you can find that in the tech preview.
Okay.
Especially with the new layout container, I expect us to have more examples. Also check out the community. I highly anticipate that people will be building really cool dashboards that they want to show off. Also take a look at LinkedIn. There will be a lot of people posting the most awesome Qlik Sense dashboards that you can imagine.
When will the rich text object be available?
Yes, so as long as you don't take any decisions on buying futures, then I can reveal my best estimates. The new text object will definitely come within this year. Whether it will make the November cutoff for the November release for on-premise, it's still in the air. So, but definitely during November on SaaS.
Is it possible to import a chart from Excel into Qlik Sense now? Or maybe even copy-paste into a rich text object?
So my understanding is there is no direct way to import the chart. What you would look to do is bring in the underlying data from Excel and then build a native Qlik chart. And the advantage of that native Qlik chart is then it's completely interactive, it's explorable. Excel charts are quite fiddly and hard to build. Then they give you a fixed view, whereas building out native Qlik charts is definitely a better option there. You could bring it in as a static image file, but that kind of breaks the user experience of interacting with objects and data.
The next question is another follow-up on that. Do values in an ad hoc table and a rich text object, do those still change on the selections or are they static?
So the table function in the new text object is more for formatting. It allows you to place text in columns, to have equal spacing, to make a metrics table. It's not meant to be a replacement of anything. It's purely for formatting.
Okay. It is what it says it is, a text.
Yeah.
Next question. A user who subscribes to a chart, will they be notified if I create a public bookmark?
So I can take that one. So subscribing to a chart or monitoring a chart, anything that is a personal thing, will not really know that, for example, a bookmark is applied or a bookmark has been created, because the bookmark is against the entire data model. Even if it feels like you're in a bar chart, you're doing selection against a bar chart, you're clicking save bookmark, the chart doesn't know that that is where the selections are done. So it is in the data model that selections are done, and that's very separate from the front-end UI.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. And the next question. Where can we find some documentation on those search expressions, Patrick, that you were showing?
Sure, I saw that one coming up. There is this post by Arturo, and he made this really cool cheat sheet that's available. So just go Qlik Sense cheat sheet version 2.0. And it's a PDF that you can download. It's available in multiple languages. And you can see here, for example, what are some of the different search options you can do, how to use a wildcard search, how to use fuzzy search, modifiers. So it shows you kind of some of the options that are available instead of just clicking a value or just searching for a value within the list box.
That's great. Someone's already put together a cheat sheet for everyone to use. I love it. Thank you. Next question. How can I send specific users a public bookmark link?
So within the app, within the system, there is no possible way of saying share with a certain person. So this will be, you create the public bookmark, you get the link to the bookmark, and you use an external tool, whatever communication platform you have, and send that to your colleague or other user.
Okay. And just a couple more questions. Are all of these features included in a standard Qlik Cloud subscription, or are some of these add-on features?
So all of them are included. There's no add-on features that require a different license.
Fantastic. So everything we've seen is what will be available for everybody. Great. And the last question today, how can I apply a bookmark to a monitored chart?
So I can do that. A monitor chart is what we call a snapshot. It is a live chart, but it has the data embedded within the chart. And whenever an app does a reload, the data is updated for that snapshot. That's why it can reside in the hub without actually having a connection to the app and having to spin up the entire app just because you want to see a KPI in the hub, which means that whatever selections was done before you click monitor the chart is what's going to remain within that chart. If you want to have a live visualization, if you want to be able to do selections and so on, you need to go to the monitor chart, you need to say go to source, and then you'll open up the app, the chart you were at, and then you can start doing selections and applying bookmarks and so on.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This first Techspert Talks Visualization Day has been really cool. Appreciate you guys sharing all these exciting app design capabilities.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Troy, for giving us this opportunity to reach out through this channel. I know it's really popular, and I'm really happy to be able to tell people about all the new things that are coming in the visualization space for Qlik Sense.
Yeah. And I'm happy about showing the old school things. And if there's something you know about bookmarks that I've missed or something, send us a comment, because bookmarks is really powerful, even if it's really old.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Troy. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this session. And thank you to our expert panel for presenting. Having Patrick, Bruno, and Patrick share with us has been really special.
Here's our legal disclaimer. And thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day.